Hey guys, welcome to my channel. As you can see the thumbnail, what if Issei become a book-eating magician part 2. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe to my channel, and also watch previous episodes. Let's start the video. The dimension shattered and Issei found himself in the spot where he was when Dante had created the dimension. Oh shit, your energy. Dante had forgotten to suppress Issei's energy while they were in the dimension. Now that he had awoken a big part of it, it was flaring wildly around and needed to be masked. Thankfully, there weren't any strong forces in Kuo. Rias and Sona aren't here yet. Some strays may come search for them, and if they were really unlucky, a yokai had been in the area. Who would really come was unexpected. Dante sat down leaning onto a tree. I'll be taking a nap, wake me if anything happens. He immediately dozed off. Issei looked at him, his expression not changing. There was the sound of a magic cycle. Issei turned around and looked a young woman in the eyes. She had sapphire blue eyes and general blue waist, long hair, and was wearing a light blue open jacket with a dark blue tank top that didn't really cover anything up and revealed it more or less. She had blue jeans and of course blue sneakers. The only thing that wasn't blue was her skin. It was a light pale, but not even near on Dante's ghost level. An interested look was in her eyes as she looked up and down Issei. Issei didn't mind and just continued staring into her blue eyes with his dead ones. She tilted her head slightly and locked eyes with him once more, before taking a step closer. And another one, and another one. She now stood almost directly in front of Issei, and it was clearly visible that he was at least a head smaller than she was. Granted, he was barely 13. Slowly extending her hand, she pointed a finger at his head, and that came closer and closer, before touching it. Issei's eyes were still fully focused on her eyes. After 3 seconds of touching him without getting a reaction, her eyes suddenly widened, her breath were heavy, and a blush creeped up her face. Perfect, her eyes were now lustfully fixated on his, and Issei could not help but blink in slight confusion. There was the sound of a magic circle. He found himself again in a cave, and the next moment she jumped on him. He wanted to retaliate with an attack of his own until the hormones hit him. He might have suppressed his emotions to the point where they don't even exist anymore, but he never had to deal with hormones, and he just hit puberty. So instead of unleashing his flames and engaging in epic combat, he stayed put and analyzed the weird feelings his brain was trying to force on him while the woman he had just met seconds ago was pressing her body on his in a very sexual way. Little Issei suddenly had a mind of his own. His personal place suddenly went hard without Issei commanding it to. He didn't even know that they could do that. Now he felt the woman grind her private parts on his private parts, and his brain tried to tell him that it should feel good, but instead of feeling good, Issei felt intimidated and made a decision no other sane man would do in this situation. Can we even call Issei sane? He castrated himself. He had more than one reason for this. First off, he could easily regenerate later. Second off, his private parts weren't currently under his control, and he didn't want to know what would happen if they fully went out of control. Third off, it stopped the part of the brain that told him it should be feeling good. How he castrated himself? Flame sword. Judging from the sudden change from lust to confusion in the woman's eyes, he could tell that that wouldn't be the normal reaction. She froze and blinked multiple times before searching with her crotch for his little Issei. After not succeeding in finding it, she crawled down and looked for herself. After verifying that Issei had in fact castrated himself, she looked him in the eyes with an "Are you for real?" look in them. Issei just blankly started back. Did you just castrate yourself? Issei didn't react and just kept staring into her eyes without any change of expression. You're a weird one, aren't ya? Still no response. I'm keeping you. Now that got a blink out of Issei. Oh yeah, right, introducing, I always forget that part. My name's Tiamat, the Dragon Queen, or the Chaos Karma Dragon, and you are? Ah yes, the part where Issei got to speak for a minute or so. Issei just started at her. He didn't speak. The last time he said anything was when he asked his first target for forgiveness. Could he even speak anymore? Thankfully, Dante came to the rescue. He's the new host of the Origin Phoenix, Issei Huduen. My mate. Issei was pulled into her embrace and held there. He didn't mind. Tiamat had proven friendly. And you are? It was more a command than a question. Her eyes showed a reptilian anger. She was ready to fight for Issei. Do not worry, Dragon Queen, I am Dante, your mate's loyal servant and literally bound to his soul. Issei felt Tiamat's grip relax. Ha Phoenix, I could swear you feel like a dragon. Dante's eyebrow twitched. He is a dragon. Tiamat blinked twice, frowned, and looked from Issei to Dante, back and again to Dante. The phoenix is a bird. The last time I checked. Dante massaged his temples and mumbled something about fucking feather sacks before looking back at Tiamat. That is only partly true. You see, the Origin Phoenix, like in the Phoenix, requires a host, and the most well-known host is that annoying bird who was named Legendary Phoenix and was believed to be the Phoenix. The stupidest part about this is that people seem to not notice the absence of that very same Legendary Phoenix, because he died after not being able to fully unlock the Origin Phoenix's powers. And then the next few hosts came until I joined the Origin Phoenix, then some more came, and now we have this boy as the current Phoenix.
And if you ask why you haven't heard of other people that called themselves Phoenix, that's because most of them desired to live peaceful lives and didn't really interact with the supernatural, while others just utterly failed to unlock the Phoenix and died through really stupid means, like challenging someone far above their power level.
There were a few seconds of silence, until Tiamat spoke. And how does that make him a dragon? There was once more silence, during which Dante looked at his hands in a "how fucking stupid am I" kind of manner. Well, he was born from pure energy, Tiamat nodded. Yep, he's a dragon. She turned her gaze back to Issei, heart seemingly appearing in her eyes. My dragon. A magical circle appeared under the two dragons.
And now I'm his familiar. Dante's sweat dropped. 4 years later, Issei bought a house on the other side of Kuo and got enrolled in Kuo Academy. Why did Issei enroll himself at Kuo Academy? Well, it was more a way to search for another purpose than to interact with people and learn stuff.
Stopping Tiamat from jumping him was a good purpose, but it wasn't active all the time, because Tiamat didn't jump him all the time, at least not anymore. She still visited him almost daily and cuddled him every chance she got, but as one of the 5 dragon kings she had to defend and sort out problems in her territory, aka the familiar forest. It was funny to think that devils claimed this town 3 years ago as their own, even though Issei lived here and it was technically the Origin Phoenix's territory, but he didn't mind. The 2 devils in charge were really young and inexperienced, and until now they haven't seemed to notice him. Maybe he could make it his purpose to get him out of his territory. No, bad idea. From the minimal knowledge he had over devils, he knew that the current Lucifer was a Grimoire and the current Leviathan a Citia, and by letting Dante spy on him he found out that the devils in charge carried the names Rias Grimoire and Sona Citia. He really didn't want to aggravate 2 Mahus. Issei wasn't scared of them, he could easily survive the battle, but he really didn't want to get on the devil's bad side. It would just end up annoying and he would be hunted down by some idiot devils that try killing him, and he would gain a lot of attraction and many different factions would probably try and recruit him. And the fact that killing 2 people out of pride could trigger his monster to free itself, that just wouldn't end well for anyone. Knock knock. Hey, Issei. Yes, today was the first day of school, and as expected Tiamat had also enrolled herself in Kuo Academy and somehow had gotten a place right in his class. She asked him to call her Mio Heryu while they were at school, because that was her cover name, but that action caused Dante to almost scream in confusion, because Issei didn't speak. Well, currently Tiamat is waiting for him outside his door, so that they can walk to school together, because there's no way in hell that she doesn't introduce herself as his girlfriend. Issei looked at the watch on his arm. It was 6:55 a.m. Kuo Academy was 10 minutes away and school started at 8, but they were asked to be there at 7:30, because they were new students and they still needed some papers or something along those lines. Issei stood up and looked at himself at the mirror. It wasn't like he cared for his looks, he just didn't want to cause attention by violating the school rules. He hated attention, because attention from the normal students would get him attention from the supernatural ones, and he really didn't want their attention. Seeing that he had nothing to worry about, he went to the door and opened it to reveal Tiamat, who was wearing a school uniform by herself, pulling down the skirt. Man, who designed this must be a massive pervert. The "don't hide anything" and the chest stands extra out thanks to it being the only white spot on the uniform. Dante appeared next to them. Gotta agree with that. Issei just looked Tiamat in the eyes and started walking to school, the Dragon Queen quickly following and grabbing his hand and enveloped his arm in her breast. Not that he minded, he had learned to suppress his hormones. Arriving at the school gates, he was immediately glared at by almost every single male student, because of him already having a girlfriend and a hot one at that.
No way. Look at how lucky he is. How does someone like him deserve something like that?
Oh look, a new beautiful girl, and she's taken. Why fate, why? One day, sniff asterisk. Yeah, advanced senses might be nice, but sometimes what he heard was just annoying or straight up stupid, might as well ignore it. Sona was a rather composed person, but when she saw the 2 new students she almost ran off. She was rather unique, because she hadn't just gotten the Citia clan's power over water, but also the Rain clans, who are now extinct due to her mother having passed. Advanced sensing, and those sensing powers told her that the 2 new students were using power suppressors. The cruel joke was that both had their unique suppressors, and both had extremely high-quality suppressors she couldn't identify. That was very scary and meant that both of them were at the very least high mid-class, because if they would have had someone else give them suppressors, then the suppressors would feel similar, but both were completely unique. It required a lot to make such high-quality suppressors and also a lot of energy to sustain them as flawlessly as both of them did. The blue-haired, blue-eyed girl didn't show any signs of energy lost, while the boy just didn't look alive at all. Wouldn't it be for the fact that he was moving, and she could sense his heartbeat and breath, she would have been easily convinced that he was indeed dead. His face was blank on the level where Kaneko appeared like a hyperactive girl in comparison. His mouth was nothing more than a slit on his face and his eyes were cold on dead, not focusing on anything they met. It really creeped her out, and by the looks of it other students also didn't feel safe around him. Only the new girl that was basically glued to his arm looked happy around him. Those 2 weren't normal. She had to tell Rias that those 2 were possible threats and that they might be able to single-handedly overpower both their peerages. A shiver run down her spine. How did they manage to get into Kuo? What were their intentions? Did they mean any harm? She had to find out, but for now she just needed to act formal and friendly. Good morning, I'm Suna Shitori, the student council president. Am I right to assume that you are the new transfer students? Sona looked down at the paper in her hands. Issei Hudu and Mio Huryu? Mio nodded in response. Issei just looked at her with cold eyes. He was focusing on her and that made her feel really uneasy. It was like staring down into an endless pit filled with nothing, absolutely nothing. Before she could lose herself in that infinite nothingness, Mio pulled her back into reality. Yes, that's us. Are you here to show us around? Sona immediately looked into Mio's eyes and tried to ignore Issei's cold gaze still on her. Yes, I am going to show you around the school, so that you have a basic layout of the school grounds. Sona started walking, not really caring if they followed her. A part of herself even hoped that they just didn't. While she was trying to calm herself, Tiamat was talking to Issei via mental link that familiars have. She could sense us. How she reacted wasn't natural at all. She was trying to hide her fear, but it looks like she doesn't know who she's dealing with. She would have instantly panicked if she knew who I truly was, but she didn't. But now the devils know about our presence. Shit. I didn't know that she got the Rain clan ability. Her mother was the last member, but now it's already too late. They are going to want to talk with us sometime. Some people would question if Issei was even listening, while other people would be confused by how he doesn't even talk in his mind. Well, first off, Tiamat knew that Issei might not be a big talker, but she knew that if he was willing to, he would hear every word of a conversation. And for the second point, Issei doesn't talk. After being shown around the school, classes have already started and the pair of dragons was let to their classroom where they parted ways with the devil. Tiamat knocked on the door, getting her homeroom teacher's attention. Come in. Here they were stopped by a figure, a stupid stray devil who thought himself superior to the two dragons. Ah, two human lovers SSSS, how cute, you're going to be an excellent meal. Tiamat had a hard time not laughing her ass off after sensing that the stray was barely mid-low tier while Issei just coldly looked at the new annoyance. He wouldn't last long. A tall man, 2 meters more or less, with black hair and reptilian hazel eyes, long fangs for teeth and a ridiculously long snake tail. What's so funny, insect? Tiamat went silent and Issei stepped back. She was way too easily aggravated. A storm was brewing. The stray froze in place, panic appearing in his eyes. Howling winds, he fell to his knees, silently asking for forgiveness that he knew he wouldn't get. Crackling fire, Tiamat slowly began walking to him. Growling thunder, the stray felt himself shrinking more and more, and he saw how weak he truly was. Rumbling stone, Tiamat raised her right arm, her hand dragonic with sharp claws. Chaos takes over the world, a clean swoop right through the throat. The stray held his throat and fell to the ground. Issei shot a fireball at him to give him a quick death. The ball hit its target and seconds later there was nothing left. Not even ashes remained. Issei silently apologized. Thanks for cleaning up. Issei came back to her side and gave her a deadpan, like he always did. Tiamat pouted. Yeah, presence wasn't necessary, I get it. Issei turned his head back forward and they started going home. Not noticing the figure that emerged from the shadows of a tree. Well, that was rather. The figure looked at where the stray had stood before being killed. Not even ashes remained. Interesting. The figure walked back into the shadows, activated a magical circle, and disappeared with a flash. Rias Gremory was sitting by her desk, in the Occult Research Club. She was one of the school's 2 Wani Samus and the president of the Occult Research Club. Her body was ridiculous, just stupidly mature, D+ cups, perfect hips, no extra fat, and beautiful face. How did people not notice that something was off? Well, because anime logic and because she's a devil, a pure-blooded one by that, and her brother is one of the 4 current leaders of Hell, also known as the Famaus. He was the Mao with the title Lucifer and was considered one of 2 super devils. She, like her brother, got the power of destruction, POD for short, from her mother, Venelana Gremory, formerly Baal. The big difference between her and her brother's power of destruction was that he was a master in using it and looked like a total badass while doing so, and she could fire balls of it, many balls, that's it. What her Gremory power is, let's worry about that later. Because she was currently waiting for a certain white-haired girl to arrive from a spying mission. It was lunch at Kuo Academy and Sona had come to visit her. She had told Rias about the 2 new students and their hidden power and that they were at least high mid-tier, aka stronger than Rias and Sona themselves. She had sent Kaneko to see to check it for herself, not that she didn't trust Sona's Rain senses, but she would also see what her Rook could sense in them. Kiba was waiting with her in the room, while Akeno was preparing tea, because she was always preparing tea when she didn't have to do anything else. Well, Rias was bored and just waited and waited and waited and waited, and Kaneko entered the room and waited, and oh wait, what? The little girl was shaking and looked like she was about to cry. Kaneko, what did they do to you? Rias was more than ready to confront both of the intruders and absolutely annihilate Reed, not even touch them with her power of destruction. The little girl sat down on one of the couches and breathed heavily. Kiba gave her a piece of chocolate that helped her immensely to calm down. No, nothing like that. Rias blinked and started thinking who or what could have scared Kaneko like that. They just sat there, menacingly. Why did that sound so familiar? Rias looked at her Rook with disbelief in her eyes. How could someone sit menacingly? Okay, stupid question, but how was it enough to scar the life out of Kaneko? The Nekomata answered the unasked question. Their life force: blue girl, strong, boy, strong, angry, dead, monster. What? The boy is a strong angry monster that isn't alive. Okay, Kaneko was quite possibly overwhelmed by the two and is now really confused. That Rias understood. The two new students are certainly strong, and she should be really careful around them. That didn't really reach Rias. She needed to decide what to do with the two of them. A small, but rather intelligent part of her mind told her to inform her brother about the situation. But Rias was too prideful. An even smaller and way stupider part tried convincing her that she could face them head-on and kill both of them. But Rias wasn't bloodthirsty. Another part suggested her to ignore them and just let them do their thing. But Rias didn't want to do that, and another part just spoke one word: recruit. But Rias was stupid enough to think she could actually pull that off. That was going to cost her. Well, until now school was useless except for the fact that he got the attention of the devils thanks to it. A rather bad thing actually, but it could evolve into something really nice and give him a purpose. Yes, a purpose, something he had been searching for all the time. Dante had gone out again and was watching the devils, looking how they reacted to Issei. Issei didn't care. He was sitting on his bed and waiting. He wasn't waiting for Tiamat to return from observing her territory to eat dinner with him. He wasn't waiting for Dante to return and report about the situation. He waited for something he had been waiting for his entire life. Without it he would stay lonely. There was a locked door. His entire life he had been alone. He had locked his heart away. The doors were still unmovable, but that wasn't the only thing holding him back from interacting with people. A monster stood in front of the door. He would hurt them. There was a man in front of the monster. He would hurt or even kill them. He was sure of that. He didn't trust himself. The man in the basement. He could take a life without hesitation. There was a pistol on his head. Issei looked at his hands. At his bloody hands, they took so many lives. They would go on. He wasn't strong enough to stop the monster. He could only restrict it, but for how long? One day his purpose would come from the monster. The trigger was pulled. He would be the monster would have a purpose. The monster would be the purpose. Lord Issei, he snapped out of it. Turning his head he looked at Dante who had a shocked expression. He had returned the moment he felt Issei's energy act up. Issei looked at the mirror. There was a boy in the mirror. A lonely boy, tears rolling down his cheeks, but no emotions. The boy looked down at his hands. There was blood on them. His own. He had started bleeding from gripping his hands too hard. He looked back into the boy's eyes, the eyes that have seen thousands of people die through those hands. Kiba, there was no better option. Kiba would be the one who would spy the two new students. Rias had decided that, why not Akeno? Akeno was a really bad spy, and because she was a girl, Mio could get jealous, and not even God knows what would happen if Mio and Akeno engage in combat. Why not Kaneko? Rias looked at Kaneko who was mumbling to herself and nibbling a cookie, still shaking. Why not Rias herself? First off, she would never admit it, but she also sucks at spying, and second off, she would never admit it, but she was way too prideful. Kiba, yes, Kiba, the guy who was followed by fangirls, was definitely the perfect choice for this job. It was decided. Rias Gremory would send her knight, Kiba Yudo, to spy on two apex predators, who they knew nothing about, with probably unimaginable power. Yeah, that didn't really sound motivating. Not that Rias cared. Her mind was set on one thing and one thing only: recruit. Risks, many; consequence, even more; care, goddammit Rias. She was Rias Gremory and she wanted an apex predator as her pawn. Or knight, or rook, or bishop, who cares? Time to call the blonde guy. Kiba, her knight jumped from his seat. Rias had totally forgotten that he was already in the room. He turned to her, his typical smile on the lips. What is it, Rias? She pridefully smiled back. You are going to spy on two people. Kiba blinked once, twice, realized that the two people could literally be anyone and stiffened. He had a suspicion. And those two people are Issei Hudu and his girlfriend Mio Hiryu. Kiba, having heard what Koneko had muttered about those two individuals, went pale. His suspicion had been correct, and he wasn't happy about it. Are you sure that's a good idea, Rias? Rias blinked, being too concentrated on fantasizing what kind of powers Issei and Mio had to realize that she was basically sending Kiba into a suicide mission. Yeah, Kiba just sweat dropped and left the room, mentally preparing himself for his probable death. Well, Issei found out one thing about devils: they really sucked at spying. To be fair, spying on Issei was borderline impossible, because anybody who looked at him would immediately turn away once he looked in their general direction.
There was a 5-meter radius that nobody, except Tiamat, entered without exiting right afterwards, and another 10-meter radius where nobody, again except Tiamat, would stop walking.
There were a lot of rumors about him, but they never went above him being a delinquent that robbed people for fun. No one suspected him to have already killed somebody. Back to the devils, one of them was a blonde boy that looked like the ideal handsome boy, short blonde hair, light blue eyes, always smiling, and always behaving very handsome. The other one was a white-haired girl with blue-green eyes. The boy had a problem with fangirls. They were literally swarming him and did actually a pretty good job, by just being in their general area and never directly looking at them. The girl though, she just stared at both Issei and Tiamat, and if either one of them would look at her, she would turn her head away and just stood there waiting for them to forget about her. So Issei locked eyes with her and just started straight into the girl's soul. Not literally, but Momo felt like he was stripping her naked, and after 10 seconds top, she ran off. Best spy ever, would hire again. The blonde went slightly pale when he noticed his comrade devil leaving and almost fainted when Issei's head jerked into his direction. The blonde made the wise decision to not make eye contact with Issei. He would have probably failed at one moment or another, but then the one that Issei had stared down came back. Issei's head jerked back into her direction and she visibly shuddered when his eyes hit her.
She averted his gaze the best she could and walked straight to them, gaining a lot of attention from everyone that saw this act of bravery. She stood there 2 meters away from the 2 dragons while being impaled by Issei's eyes. The student council pre-president W wants to gulp speak with you.
Issei stood up, prompting the girl to jump back and everyone to stare at him. He sent his gaze over the crowd and they all continued whatever they had done before staring at Issei. Then he looked back at the girl and she immediately headed to the student council office. Issei and Tiamat followed. Reaching the door, the white-haired girl knocked on the door and waited while Issei was still focusing on her, and Tiamat had clinched to Issei's arm with a smile on her lips. Come in. At those words, the white-haired girl opened the door and let Issei and Tiamat inside. The student council room wasn't anything special, a room like all the others in the academy with a bunch of tables facing the wall for the members of the council and one desk for the president opposite to the door facing the middle of the room, where there were 2 couches facing each other with a desk between them. Issei noticed one thing about the student council. He didn't point it out nor did he show any reaction to the discovery. It consisted purely of female students. If Issei would actually talk and had some emotions, he would question how much of a feminist Sona was, but that wasn't Issei, so he just ignored the detail and sat down on one of the couches, Tiamat immediately taking the spot beside him, and then he looked Sona Sitia straight in the eye. The president visibly flinched when his eyes met hers and had a hard time keeping her monotone look and voice. Greetings, you already know who I am. Do you know why I brought you here? Tiamat gave Sona a smug smile. We can only guess, heiress of the Sitia clan. Sona's eyes widened at that. I want to know what you two are doing on devil territory. Tiamat's smile grew a little bit. Devil territory? Sona blinked in slight confusion. Mio knew something that Sona didn't, and she was using this knowledge against her.
Yes, devil territory. And when did Issei hand it over?
That caused everyone in the student council room to abruptly turn their eyes to Issei. He owned the territory? Issei didn't react. He knew what Tiamat was going for and he would allow it. What do you mean by that? Sona was now frowning while she was moving her gaze from Tiamat to Issei and back. Just that he owns this territory for 17 years. Sona's frown deepened. And how so? Tiamat's smile now showed teeth. It's his birthplace. Sona rose an eyebrow. How did that make this his territory? A lot of people are born in Kuo and that didn't mean that they owned the town. Before she could ask any questions, Tiamat continued. And a dragon's birthplace is always its first territory. Everybody froze. A dragon in Kuo. This territory was supposed to be unused and was claimed by the devils 5 years ago. How did they miss a dragon? She needed to inform her sister. As much as she hated it, she was not on the level to deal with such a problem. Before you go over all your documents and contact whoever your lawyer is, we want to have a talk with all the devils after school, because we don't have any time left. The bell rang almost on cue. Sona nodded. She had no other option. Meet us after school in the old school building. With a nod, Tiamat left herself. Sona noticed that the whole time Issei sat there, emotionlessly. Her face morphed into an expression of shock. She had heard only about one dragon that didn't show emotions. It would explain how they haven't noticed him. It would explain why he seems so powerful. It would mean that they're in deep shit. President, everything all right? She looked at Momo, who was standing in front, all the other members who had stood up after seeing Sona's expression. This Issei, he probably is, related to the Ouroboros dragon. A shiver went through the spines of all members of Sona's peerage. It would make sense, but it was scary to think about. What? Rias couldn't believe what she had just heard. Sona had called Rias to the student council room right after the first afternoon class, and now Sona was telling her something that she just didn't want to believe. Yes, Rias, 2 dragons, one probably related to the Ouroboros dragon and the other of unknown origin. Both of them are coming to us after classes, because the one that's related to the Ouroboros dragon was born here, and you know what that means. The redhead still shocked nodded, and they're coming today. The way she said that last word wasn't very Sona-like, and it made Rias go pale. So you're saying, Rias looked her friend straight in the eye. We're fucked. Sona didn't expect that kind of response from Rias but ignored it for a moment. Yes, we are indeed fucked. I think we should call our siblings. Are you sure about that? Sona facepalmed. Rias never liked her brother interfering. Rias, we're dealing with the spawn of the most powerful being in the world. I think that you should know that we stand not the slightest of changes against the two, and if we somehow do, what do you think the Ouroboros dragon would do if we attacked them? Rias' eyes widened in realization. She didn't know how to argue against that. Exactly, I'm going to inform our siblings, but I'm going to tell them that they should not act before they speak. I wouldn't do that. Both of them froze and a new figure emerged from the shadows. The figure was completely hidden in the shadow of its hood, except for the boots, but the voice revealed that it was male. Rias and Sona went into fighting positions. Who are you and what do you want? Oh, I'm just checking what the devils are doing on my master's territory. The two heiresses paled when hearing the man's words. I don't mean any harm, but you were informed that we don't want you to inform anybody before the meeting, is that clear? Shivers ran down the devil's spines. It took a while for Sona to answer. Yes, we understand. With that the figure re-emerged into the shadows and Sona felt his presence disappear. The two devils looked at each other and both agreed on one thing. We're fucked. Sona and Rias were standing behind the president desk in the Occult Research Club. Their peerages were scattered around the room surrounding the couch in the middle of the room that was facing the two heiresses. The air was tense. They were waiting for Akeno to bring the two guests in. Nobody spoke a word. All eyes were locked on the door and silence had swallowed them all. Knock knock. Everyone in the room felt a shiver down their spines. The dragons have arrived. The door opened revealing Akeno followed by Issei and Mio. Tiamat was smiling, while Issei still didn't show any emotion or expression on his face. Issei's eyes wandered around the room. The short girl with white hair and golden hazel eyes was the first one. She visibly twitched when his gaze hit her, and her face was slowly drained of colors the longer he looked at her. Next was the blonde one with all those fangirls. He stiffened when Issei looked at him. He had his eyes closed and his genuine smile quickly turned visibly fake and he had a hard time maintaining it. Then there was the really bad spy girl. She instinctively looked away when their eyes met and her eyes started to search the room while he looked at her, trying to find something else to focus on. Next up Akeno. The girl shifted uncomfortably in place while he stared her down and was she blushing? Next Rias. The redhead tried to look back at him, but immediately failed. A slightly shameful look appeared in her eyes. Right next to her was Sona. Sona held 2 seconds until looking away, but she started sweating bullets afterwards. Next to her was a girl with black hair that reached her knees and hazel eyes. She focused on a point on the ground in front of Issei and didn't move in the slightest. Before he could inspect the other devils in the room, Rias cleared her throat, gaining his attention. Would you please sit down? Issei complies without hesitation. Tiamat scans the couch with her eyes before joining him. She was the first to speak. Before you two make any stupid mistakes later along the line, I will inform you that Issei is fine with you being here and doing whatever you like as long as you don't try to limit what he can do and as long as you don't annoy him. Sona and Rias blinked multiple times. Both hadn't expected such a generous offer. Rias looked at Issei and frowned slightly. Is that really all right? Issei just nodded in response. Silence consumed the room once more until Tiamat disturbed it. Is there anything else you feel necessary to talk about? Sona shook her head and Rias hesitated for a bit until asking a rather risky question. Who exactly are you, if I may ask? Tiamat sent a questioning look to Issei, who just refocused his dead eyes on her. She saw this as a yes, I'm Tiamat the Dragon Queen and Chaos Karma Dragon. Every devil in the room went pale by the name drop. And this is the current generation's Phoenix. She poked Issei's shoulder, no reaction. Rias went a little paler by the mention of Phoenix. Nobody said a word. This time Sona was the one to break the silence. The current generation's Phoenix? I thought he was a dragon, and that the Phoenix is immortal? Tiamat just tilted her head and gave her an awkward look. Well, it's complicated and I don't really have the time to explain everything to you. Just trust me, that is a dragon, and yes, he is in fact immortal. And with that the two dragons left again, leaving behind a bunch of confused devils. Rias was the first to talk after the dragons had left. Well, at least no Ouroboros dragon spawn. Thanks for watching. Part 2 is over. Hope you all enjoyed. If you like this video, please do like, share, comment and subscribe.